Mics are live.
Okay, we can start.
One second, let me just get the
Okay.
live stream up. Okay.
Live stream.
Should be good to go.
Good evening. This is the meeting of Open Space Committee for Newington, October 12th, 2023. We can start the meeting. Do a roll call to see who's here, who would be reading the names.
Yep. Actually, you want to grab that, or?
I don't have a list in
I
front
can
of
do
me.
it. I've got it. Want me to do it?
Sorry.
I'll record it on these. All right. So I'll just go by Commissioner right now. So Commissioner Conway?
Here.
Commissioner Bedrejko?
Here.
Commissioner Austin Goldstein?
Here.
Commissioner Pasquarelli?
Here.
Commissioner Page?
Here.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. The next point on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Nope, there are no changes.
So that makes the, do we need
I
to?
approve, I motion.
Yep, motion to accept the agenda.
Anyone second?
Second?
Okay, thank you. That's great. The agenda is approved. The third point on the agenda for tonight is election of officers. There's a remaining opening. It's the election for,
Public comments, even though we don't have any.
Oh, I shouldn't put it in
is it the wrong?
We have election of officers before public comments.
Oh, yeah, on this online. Seeing as how that we need, we have an opening for the secretary of this committee. I would like to put a call for nominations for secretary. At this time, would anyone like to nominate somebody from this committee to be secretary? You can nominate yourself as well. I heard a rumor,
Yes.
which to me sounds like volunteering.
If absolutely positively
Uh,
nobody else.
Commissioner
wants.
Conway has her hand up on Zoom.
Yes, I'm just wondering what the role of secretary entails.
Okay, so the role of secretary under this context is, so normally a secretary would do minutes, however, staff takes care of that. So the other two roles of the secretary are that typically when there is something like a motion or an item to be adopted, that the secretary would read that. And then the other one is if the chair and vice chair are not present, the secretary would run the meeting.
Well, I will nominate myself to be the secretary if no one else is interested.
I second the nomination.
Are there any other nominations at this time before we close the call for nominations? Okay, so let's close this part of it, and now we vote, correct? So we just, how do we do it? A raise of hands, or?
I would do a roll call since
Roll
we're
call?
on a hybrid scenario.
Okay, great.
So I'll do the roll call. So Commissioner Conway,
Yes.
Commissioner Bedrejko, Commissioner Austin Goldstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Pasquarelli,
Yes. Commissioner
Commissioner Page.
Yes.
It's unanimous. You got the job.
Fantastic. Great.
Now, are you really going to tell her what she has to do?
So public comments. I'm not sure if there's anybody from the public on the meeting, but if there are, we can,
Nobody on Zoom.
okay. Nobody on Zoom, there's nobody present here. So we can, I guess, skip this part, and if somebody joins the meeting, we can, we'll know that they're there later. The next agenda item is approval of the minutes from the April 13th meeting. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second,
Thank you. So the meeting, the minutes for the April 13th meeting are approved.
We have a, Madam Chair, that we have a first and a second, and we just
Oh.
need to have the vote.
Oh, we need to have a vote. Sorry. Okay.
That one actually can all just be an aye and be unanimous.
Okay. Okay. Does, approval of the minutes?
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, and that just brings us down to new business. And there was preparation of some, Paul put together a draft of just a proposal draft of criteria for the acquisition of open space. And again, this is just a draft, but this is the point in the meeting where we could review that together.
Yes, so thank you. First, I'd like to actually put up, so this was not included in the item that I sent out. I kind of apologize for this presentation. It is very text heavy. We're dealing with a text document. I have them up on the screen. So this is actually with consultation with the Open Space Committee. These are the acquisition criteria that were kind of narrowed down from a combination of through the criteria provided by the consultant, also with the ideas of the committee members as well. So you can kind of see these have all been incorporated into the working draft. These are actually more weighted in how many responses and how the level of interest that they got, that you see them on the screen here. So again, protecting habitat with the NDDB was higher on the list, preserving high quality natural waters, providing a valuable resource for recreation, forestry, fishing, and wildlife habitat, protect and complement existing preserved open space, agricultural land, especially that will aid in wildlife migration, protect a naturally occurring feature such as a shoreline, river, continued, and provide protection of habitats most at risk of climate change, including forested swamps, lands adjacent to freshwater wetlands, core forests, and riparian lands adjacent to cold water streams. Protect a native ecology, ecological community that is unique or uncommon, and that protects a relatively undisturbed, outstanding example of native ecological community. Those two I kind of put together. They came from both, but they kind of got condensed. And then protect natural lands with high carbon storage and sequestration, such as forests as wetlands. And then it continues on to the next page. And again, preserve our local agricultural heritage, preserved in perpetuity. So that's an important part of open space, to make sure that it actually stays and isn't threatened by future activities. Provide for high quality passive recreation. Provide a linkage to developing existing greenways, opportunities for recreation and non-motorized transportation. Again, the major one, this actually comes from the POCD as well, is preserve open space in the area of Cedar Mountain. There's kind of the question of, will this purchase of the property displace any businesses, homes, or other establishments? Looking at what we have in the community now and how it'll impact not only fiscally, but socially. Level of physical changes that are required to make the site suitable for passive outdoor recreation. And then there's development pressure, protecting steep slopes, preservation against soil erosion, how the public will access and enjoy the property. That kind of got distilled down and rewritten, but these were from that criteria. And then provide sites for active recreation. That was actually a little lower on the risk. On the list, there was a little more focus on the responses towards, again, habitat, towards the natural systems, and then towards passive recreation, things that might actually, not potentially influence and have an undue influence on those resources. So those were kind of the general criteria that I got. So from there, I kind of went and created a working draft. So the working draft that was sent out, I kind of divided it into sections here. I don't know if the committee wants me to read all of it. The main thing, though, is the opening statement here with the town of Newington is highly developed, with nearly 90% of land area developed or committed. With little remaining open space, the remaining undeveloped parcels have considerable significance in their opportunity to enhance and expand existing open space. That actually comes from the Plan of Conservation and Development in the open space chapter. Again, a major part of the process of looking at this and getting grants is one of those questions is, how does this relate to your POCD? Again, we kind of look at preserving open space, help protect environmentally sensitive areas, wildlife habitat, recreational uses, community character, and enhance quality of life. There's multifacets to open space. From there, I kind of went and talked about the Plan of Conservation and Development, what it identifies, existing and dedicated open space, and the goals and objectives. So there's a few goals and objectives from the POCD, which are create a townwide open space network, protect environmentally sensitive areas, and protect the small town character that is here now, and provide a sense of space and relief from intense development. So from the Planning, Conservation, and Development, those were kind of the overarching goals for the open space chapter. So we'll go on from there.
Yeah. And I would say that if somebody has a question
Oh, yeah,
or any
absolutely.
thoughts or wants to dive deeper into some
Absolutely.
aspect, that's okay.
And I'll kind of preface with it, this is a rough draft that's presented kind of for putting this information together in a more digestible way. You'll see it's still bullet pointed because I didn't want to get too far out ahead of the committee. Providing this framework, this is completely open for editing, discussion. If the committee wants to go in any other direction, I take no issues. But I wanted to put together something that was a little easier to understand than a big list that we had before that was a little difficult to slog through. So if anyone have any questions, please speak up, interrupt me. So if there's no questions on the first part.
And I'm sorry, so the purpose, is it? Not that the purpose of this is so when we go for grants, is this going to be like an attachment or? Okay.
Yes, yeah. So I think the purpose of this is kind of twofold. This is kind of that opening statement that acts and puts those priorities in place of overall, all these priorities are out there and they're all part of one type of grant application or another. Some will weigh it differently. But what is the most important to Newington? What are we looking for as far as our highest priorities? From there, this could actually be distilled down into a weighted list or kind of rubric if we're going to start grading open space to say, hey, if we have the opportunity to get 3, which would be fantastic, we have limited funds. What do these provide compared to what we have for our criteria? So I see this as kind of that start that gets the criteria down. And then from there, we can go on further weighting it or creating some type of rubric if that's where the committee wants to go.
So like if we had a massage, let's say something came up for Cedar Mountain, let's say, I know it doesn't mention it specifically here, but if there was a grant, we could massage this and maybe add that as identified in, community surveys and POCD. Okay, so this is like just kind of a general rubric and then we can massage it as each.
Yes.
It helps you evaluate and identify properties that the committee would like to acquire for them.
Okay. And this, from what I understand, this is also, once we put something together like this, we can also bring this to the town council. And then they know that this is what our thoughts are about how we prioritize those properties. So when they get presented with something, there's something behind it.
Great.
And where it came from.
Yep, and again, that's a discussion that I plan to have. Right now, the way this is structured, it's the open space committee. However, there are other towns that the same documents have been created by the committee that have been adopted by the council. So that's a discussion I think to have. But for right now, I think, coming from the committee, this is that founding document of, okay, here is the priorities. So when people look at open space, it's been discussed. It isn't just at the time, when a property comes available with our criteria, you're like, okay, what's the value of it? You're having this discussion later instead of having it ahead of time and saying, okay, it does all these things. This is a great idea. We should go for it, rather than going back and saying, okay, what is the value of this? And having that long discussion ahead of time.
Right.
To say, okay, here are those criteria that we want. Okay, now let's grade it. you can save some time later if it's understood that these are the priorities for
It'd
Newington.
be great if the town council would adopt it too. So, but one step at a time.
I believe Mitch has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I guess my question is not really knowing what the history was with the purchase or the acquisition of Eddy Farm or over on Churchill. Was a similar process engaged in then, both for criteria as well as in terms of funding? Or was that those were different processes than we're talking about?
So from my memory, the Eddy Farm, it was the purchase of the development rights. That's how that one came about. And I don't remember all the ins and outs of what happened out on the Deming Young farm.
Okay.
There was, I know at one point there was an approved subdivision that got appealed and
It was some eminent domain type of stuff.
yeah, it was a little odd how they went about that.
And I'm not sure even if there was an open space committee at that point that was active, certainly not.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason I ask is not knowing really the details of the history. While these criteria are helpful, and I appreciate Paul and anyone else who worked to curate all of this for us in a digestible way, I very much appreciate it. But I also would hope that we continue to think of the precedents that have already been set in town for acquiring land to protect it and not be limited, necessarily limited to current funds available, but think creatively in ways of working with the state. And dare I say it, even bonding monies if it was that critical. I know we're not there yet, but where there's a will, there's a way. And with these criteria and other efforts, we could certainly protect the remaining 8 or 10% we have. So thank you, though. I just wasn't sure of the history.
Yep, and that's something actually I'd be happy to look into as well. Because having the history of the process we go through these and looking forward. I've actually been reading some of the old open space committee minutes and going through there and, the process that you've gone through with looking at, again, that open space zone. And, there's been a bunch of different processes that have gone through. And I hope to continue to work with you on those initiatives as we go forward. So while we get this through, kind of thinking about as we're going forward. So that was a discussion I wanted to have with the committee as well, after we kind of get through this, get some comments, and then see what else the committee would like me to look into.
Sandra, you have a question?
I had just a question and a comment. The comment is,
Sure.
is that I don't know what's happening, but there has been like a black screen, like where the display screen for the Zoom has gone completely black and has stayed that way, at least it keeps doing that. So I don't know if there's anything that you have the ability to do on your end to make it not do that.
Okay, we'll try and take a look.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other part was the question, the first, when we were looking through the criteria, and it was the 2 pages of the criteria, is that something that we're up for discussion too, in terms of like combining some of the items? Because I think if we left it that long-winded, then it would be tougher to, when it comes down to screening things, it would take us a lot longer than if we combine maybe some of the items into a more broad category, if we could.
Yep, I think absolutely. And after we get through kind of it was the opening statement, the purpose, and once we get into the criteria, I started to pull those together by their criteria. They're kind of still in bullet point format right now, because it's to have that discussion, because I don't want to write the committee's voice for them. But I did identify those, put them, kind of group them together. And I wanted to have that discussion of whether we want it bullet pointed. For example, Weathersfield has a document where they kind of had theirs and that was included in the last, I know the last meeting was back in April, but their version of the document had it more as a paragraph that kind of highlighted those sections. So that's definitely open for discussion.
Right, and we could also, it could be running on 2 tracks. One is the public document where it is more in paragraphs, and then we also have an internal document that we can use for reference to narrow down things when we're looking to see what grants we want to apply for and things like that.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is.
And I don't know if I was writing.
I apologize for that. I don't know why this just keeps cutting
Is
out.
our video keeps cutting in and out?
It just popped back
Oh,
on.
pop
now,
back
but,
up. So
yeah, it's.
Better for Sandra, let us know so we know it's fixed on your
Oh,
end.
I can tell because it'll black
Oh,
here.
you
It's
can
just
tell? Okay.
sporadic. I just can't get it back.
Yeah,
All
it's,
right.
it's happened about half a dozen times so far.
yeah, there's a quirk in the system. There's gremlins. All right, so the next part is just the purpose of the open space selection criteria is that the Open Space Committee wishes to establish open space selection criteria for the orderly acquisition of open space. The following documents and policies should guide the criteria. Again, these are pretty much the standard ones that are out there when they're looking at grants. Of course, there's the POCD that's been brought in again at the start of this document. It's referenced again. The Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant Program, the Open Space Corridor Greenway Program, and the Recreation and Natural Heritage Program. What I've done is at the end of these slides, I've actually included those if you would like to look at what those specific criteria that they talk about after this document, I have included those for discussion. So again, the statement for the criteria, again, open space provides many environmental, economic, and cultural functions and benefits. To evaluate the benefit of the acquisition of a particular property, the town must determine which of these functions provide the most significant benefit. Then there's a kind of a statement there, not all properties are available for purchase at the same time. The opportunity for a specific acquisition could be lost. Priority must be given to properties that meet the criteria when they become available for purchase. It's recognized these criteria may be subject to different interpretations depending on the nature and circumstance of various opportunities for acquisition of open space. Any particular criteria may receive more or less weight depending on multiple factors. The following functions of open space and other strategic aspects should be considered in identifying high priority lands for acquisition. Potential open space should provide it. So this highlighted section here. This actually pretty much appeared in everyone's criteria as well. So I moved it forward into the actual statement. Again, this can all be worked around. The statement can be completely changed. I welcome your notes. But again, that provide a valuable resource for recreation, forestry, fishing, wildlife habitat, or other natural resource initiatives. It's pretty expansive on what it provides. Again, and then I went to kind of in the criteria, which are kind of grouped together. So what we really have is the first category that I kind of put together, and again, these titles can change. It's a working document. Is just natural resource protection, open space functions. So under habitat, protect the habitat of plant and animal species that are threatened, endangered, or special concern. Unless a qualified specialist have identified such species, these species should be represented by the NDDB. Protect native ecological communities that are unique or uncommon and represent relatively undisturbed native ecology. Protect and enhance wildlife corridors, including preserving open space and agricultural land that aids in wildlife migration. And then I moved to natural systems. Protect lands that preserve high quality natural waters and drinking water resources. Protect natural lands with high carbon storage sequestration value, such as forests. Protect a natural occurring feature such as a river, stream, ridgeline in the wetland, estuary, or geological feature. And then protect sites with steep slopes that protect against soil erosion. So again, it's provided the habitat systems, and again, those natural systems which our residents actually do benefit from: clean drinking water, protection of water, and then just general protection of the resources that are available to us to not disappear. So I don't know if there's any questions on that last part. If not, I'll kind of move into the next one. So the next is quality of life improvements, including recreation opportunities. The ability to obtain grants to acquire open space may require public access for recreation and educational purposes. So it's, again, provide high quality passive recreation uses. That kind of ranked higher in the discussions with the Open Space Committee than active recreation. Provide a linkage between existing open space, create or contribute to a developing or existing greenway, and offer recreation or non-motorized transportation opportunities. That is a key component of a lot of grants out there as well. And we do have a small greenway system that I think that could be expanded. And that's actually part of the POCD open space chapter anyway, that talks about that possible greenway expansion. And then provide sites for active recreation, of course, preserve and enhance local agricultural heritage. The town has done efforts to that, and I think should continue to do that, but the two efforts with the two farms
The Eddie Farm
and the Deming Young have been successful. And then from there, to move to strategic planning. All these renumbered as one on the slides, but it is three. Strategic planning and objectives. Number one is preserve open space in the area of Cedar Mountain, desirable open space area. This is identified in the POCD as a specific area it can be pointed to for grant documents. Again, is this supported by your plan? Yes, it is. Protect habitats most at risk from climate change, included foresting swamps, land adjacent to freshwater wetlands, core forest and riparian lands adjacent to cold water streams. Ability of the site to be preserved in perpetuity, predominantly in its natural, scenic, and open condition. Impact on existing businesses, homes, or establishments, including possible displacement. The one thing that is a change from your draft that you got is development pressure on the property that didn't make it into the first draft. That was as part of the criteria that was pointed out by the committee, so I added that here. And then the level of investment and physical changes to the natural systems of the property required to make the site suitable for passive outdoor recreation. Again, as I said, these are still bullet points. These are still long, and what they haven't been kind of distilled down into paragraphs. But what I'm really looking for is comments from the committee. Do you feel this document represents what your priorities were? Is there anything missing? And how would you like it to continue before I move ahead?
And if anybody has any comments, I mean, I only have a question. I mean, at this stage, I'm happy with what this says. I know you gathered criteria and you sent us many other towns' criteria so that we could have ideas and think about, you know, what the possibilities are. But is there anything that would be missing for a grant, for realizing a grant? Is there anything we should, that would be my only question would be, just to make sure that that's part of, that this document addresses, so that we're guided by the things that are going to make us successful.
I think, so part of this, what I did is by bringing in what these are guided by, by stating those specific things where the grants come underneath, I'm incorporating them by reference.
Okay.
And then there's also, these are really the meat and potatoes, I think, of the criteria. There's other small ones out there that are a little, as far as a grant application, if it wasn't in this, I don't see them as saying, oh, well, you didn't identify as the top priority. The grants are more of, does it do this?
Yep.
This is just to get us thinking about those properties, to keep it front and center, the idea of open space, what we're looking to preserve and what are the priorities.
Yep.
So I think this wouldn't cause anything to be lost.
Yep.
If you see anything or think of anything, I've pretty much looked through it. We distilled it from the grant criteria.
That's right. I expected you did, but that would be my only, would say that if we're touching all the bases for that, then I think, I mean, I would just want to make sure that everybody on this committee has an opportunity to express how they feel about, maybe the order of them or anything else, wording, how, like, as it was mentioned earlier, should it be shorter or, articulated in another way? For me, it looks good.
Yeah, I can see it kind of in that comment before. I could see it going like this potentially document could be simplified a little bit, a little more digestible for residents and the public. And then these criteria could be put in, kind of bracketed as a sheet that says, it has each individual one. And then that could be used as a rubric. Okay, you have habitat. Here are your items under habitat. Does it do these? And then you get an overall score on habitat.
Yeah, and you could, I suppose, even say definitions of what habitat is on another page. Yeah. And get the meat of it up front, possibly.
Bernadette has a question.
Great.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I'm very happy that Cedar Mountain is specifically referenced twice in this document. I wanted to wait until we reviewed the whole thing because that's, I think, we have so little left you know, I think that's what we really need to have them that mentioned several times in here, which it is. So I'm really happy to see that. And whatever format you think would be most effective in the grant process, identifying is the way, you know, I have no problem with the way it's laid out here, whatever way you think is best. You're the experts. I just wanted to say whatever way you think is best is what I agree with.
Sandra also has a question.
I was wondering if it seems like I saw native species in there, but it seemed like it was kind of buried in there. If we could make that maybe a little bit more prominent. And then my other comment was, if we could mention something about bees specifically. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, but other than just the thought of with bees being, with all the loss of the bees and then the flowers associated with the bees and things like that, and how important bees are to the ecosystem. I don't know if we could mention something about land that has the potential to be used as I don't
pollinator.
Pollinators. Yeah.
Pollinator pathways. I sorry to interject, but actually that's something that we haven't had as many development applications where I've been able to work that in here, but it's something in the past. I really actually love working into wetlands applications because you have the upland review area. If it gets disturbed, pollinator pathways are a great way to twofold have something that is a meadow that a developer only and a property owner only has to maintain a couple times a year compared to grass. You know, a monoculture,
Right.
And it provides a pollinator pathway at the same time. So I think there's great ways to work that into the process. But yeah, I think kind of that systems approach in looking at ecology is a good way to work into that.
Mitch has a question as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Whenever, is it okay if I go? Or did Gail go?
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Gail. I just wanted to second Sandra's point about pollinators, and I appreciate your comments about that. And I don't know if it's appropriate in the purview of this body, but not only in the acquisition of properties which might be conducive to that or continue in a patchwork way to preserve the pollinator pathways, if that's what they're called, because it is so vital. I agree. And also, but my second part of that is the extent to which we could collaborate with other individuals and committees in town to increase pollinator opportunities on our current, whether to whatever degree it's already occupied for parks and rec and even roadways. There are some cities and towns across the country that are doing some super, and I think even in Connecticut, that are doing some super creative activities to leave certain median strips and other areas not only unmowed, if it's appropriate for safety and so forth, but then in a methodical kind of planned way, repopulating with indigenous plants that we know will facilitate or enhance, like anything from hummingbirds to monarchs to all sorts of wild bees and so forth. So yeah, if we can revisit that at some point, if it's appropriate for this committee. So thank you.
Gail. Two comments under, I don't know whether it belongs or if it even belongs here, but Cedar Mountain they're trying to protect trap rock ridges in the state of Connecticut. And I just wonder whether that somehow could be worked into here in terms of.
Just so you're aware, there is a trap rock ridge line setback that is enforced through zoning.
Right, but I'm just wondering whether mentioning it here, because that is, it's
Yep.
we're at part of Cedar Mountain.
So we have that under, right, it's under natural systems. It's kind of buried, it's with all those natural systems.
Really point out that we have a particular structure or whatever that's already identified as.
So actually, I think that's a good comment, and I could actually, when I'm rewriting this and maybe working on that, I can specifically call out that ridge line,
Right.
because
And
that's our
also-
predominant ridge line.
I know when we were working on Save Cedar Mountain, there were studies done that Cedar Mountain is important as bird migrations. So I think, we've got two important things right there. And then thirdly, I don't know whether or where you can incorporate it, but I think this isn't only a document from our committee. There were two important surveys that were done on a community-wide basis within the past, it's going to be 5 to 6 years, I don't know, where residents of Newington came out and said preservation of open space is #1 priority. There was one done about 4 or 5 years ago. It was at the Newington High School.
The most recent survey, Gail, that we received on the council also said
Yeah,
that.
that's what I was gonna say. That was the second one. But the first one was very clear. They were doing, when was it? It was at Newington High School and they had,
Yeah, that was the thing that was before the POCD. I think that was like the sensing session for the community.
yeah, exactly. So very clearly, residents came out in 2 different vehicles saying that preservation of open space is #1. So I think that should be part of any kind of introduction or document.
Do we know if that data resides anywhere that we could at least reach out to, maybe talk to somebody and get some kind of just numbers that maybe?
It was very,
Yeah, the POCD one, we should have. and
Okay.
We should have it because it'd be part of our process on
Yeah.
that. And then the
The
most
other
recent
was
one,
done by
River
Count.
Blue Phoenix, whatever
Yeah.
thing we just did, yeah.
I will
That was
definitely look at
number
those.
one. Yeah, that
Yep.
was #1 in that most recent one. Sorry.
That is a great note, and I will look into and see how I can incorporate that.
And I'll try and find the data that POCD on. But we had, people were walking around with the little dollar, pretend dollar bills and putting them into where it should be.
Always love those shreds. Vote with dots, vote with dollars, however you can get people involved.
Would it be beneficial to flesh out more specifics about Cedar Mountain and the history in some form in this? There's a history in terms of what the town has fought for and what Gail and Mitch are saying. We've actually received feedback so I don't know if that's appropriate for this type of document. I mean, we all know this intrinsically, and we're the ones who are working on this, and it's in the plan of conservation and development. But if there's any reason why it would be beneficial to lay that out in more detail, whether it's the trap rock or migration of species or watershed or something, I would say, let's do it, but not to not to pack this thing and make it 10 pages long either.
My initial thoughts is, I can look at that kind of introduction language, and instead of, because those are broad statements right now, other than the 90% that we have that's developed or committed, and everything's kind of a broad statement. So I could edit some of the broad out and look at the most important resources in Newington that have been identified, and that those should be enhanced, protected, and for that. So I'll look at what opportunities I can to put that in. I said, without driving it. Initially, I would like this thing to be 2 pages by the time I'm done. Anytime you start, 1 page is best for people, 2 pages, okay, 3 pages, I think we're gonna lose people in the document. For initial document sent out. We can have longer documents, we can have supplemental ones, but this is kind of a good statement document about that. And then, as you said, potentially having that compendium of, okay, here are everything we have bullet pointed, drawn out, here are the specifics, but I kind of defer to the committee on that.
Sandra has her hand raised again.
Yeah, I was just wondering, thinking about when we're talking about the 90%, I know other towns adjacent to us have, for lack of a better expression, a better percentage. They have a lower development. So just to kind of drive the point home, even though if it would make the document slightly longer, but I think it could be powerful. If we say, Weathersfield has this and Rocky Hill has this, but we've only got this. So we need to make every, quarter acre count, or, however you want to phrase it, but just to make sure that, if people are saying, oh, 90% developed, maybe that's not bad if you don't have anything else to compare it to. But if you're
Yeah.
looking at the other towns, then you're like, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah, I think, my first knee-jerk reaction is look at the other ones, look at average percentage, and that could be done in a short little blurb on that one if it's talking, about how it's highly developed, and there could be a little comparative. But I do want this to be very much about Newington.
What's the state average?
That I'll have to look
Yeah,
up because it varies.
I think we're probably, developed beyond the state average, but I'm not sure about
Well,
that. But I feel like I
State
read that
average,
somewhere.
you still have Kent and the rest of the area up in the
Yes, which is
Litchfield
all-
Hills,
So.
Quiet Corner on the other side. So
I know.
Connecticut is very interesting. Well, we're developed along the highways,
Yeah.
the coast and the highways, if you look at that. And then there's other spurts in between, but that's our primary developed areas.
So let's just play this out for a moment beyond what's in the document, and let's talk about you utilizing it or going next steps. Not that we have, but just for helping us understand what we're gonna do. If I really like the idea of saying, hey, we've got to act fast because we are at this rate. We're only 10% open space and it's going fast. So we have to act quickly. But I feel like that's something that we should put in a document to like town council and say, like, because at some point we have to sell this to somebody else. We're sold. We're all on board with the mission. And so I don't know, I think this document guides the criteria for the acquisition, where we say to a grant opportunity, or we say to town council, we've done some work here and this is what really makes sense. But then I think at some point we might also consider like a brochure or something, some propaganda for the town people and for the politicians. And I think, because what I'm thinking of is we can write the greatest, tightest, list of acquisition criteria in the world, but there's going to be some more work that has to come. It's just the beginning. So that's my thought.
No, and Mitch, you probably, I don't think there's anybody on the town council that would come out against open space acquisition or whatever. It always does come down to money. Quite frankly, my concern is, every time a piece of land privately owned,
Right.
it doesn't come to the town council, it goes to TPZ, and TPZ, I don't know how to do the balance. TPZ can't say to a private property owner, we're not gonna let you do it because we want to keep open space. How do you work with that?
There's lots of, the opportunities it's really getting to it before it gets to that point.
So we have to identify.
It's
purchases.
looking at it, it's having conversations with property owners, it's having, I think it's that level of discussions that if, through discussions that I know that something could potentially be up for development and it is critical to a habitat and it has these criteria, it's something that, I go to my boss with and I say, hey, this could be an opportunity. And then we have the discussion from there. But I think it is kind of that, and even letting the property owners know that, yes, the town is interested. If it is next to one of our areas that provides critical habitat, does these things for Newington, provides these benefits environmentally and for our residents. If the owners know, they might be able to get more on a private market for development, but is there any other type of agreement combined with a grant, combined with some other things to look at? For example, is there any tax incentives for them? Is there any other type of program? So I think that's the combination too of looking at what grants are out there, what incentives there could be. And that's kind of the brochure, I think, that you're kind of talking about, putting that stuff together, not only for residents, but even potentially for property owners.
Right.
A lot of this stuff would be one-on-one discussions. It kind of ends up happening that way with acquisitions. sometimes you have a wonderful Newington resident who has owned property forever and says, I don't want to see this development, and comes to the town. But there might be other opportunities somewhere in between.
We would first have to get, when you talk about tax incentives, and I think that's great, and because we do it for developers, why can't we? But maybe it's just maybe something we have to think about for our next meeting, but how do we go about getting, because that would be a council decision, but yet that would, before it even gets to the council, we'd have to get the economic of that particular piece of property. Because it does come down to money. If it was developed, it would be this much. If it wasn't development, this is what it would cost. But yet we have to quantify the fact that undeveloped open space is not a throwaway in terms of tax dollars. There's a value, and it's hard to quantify, but there's a value to having open space in a community that raises, surrounding property values and the health of the community. But there's a lot of research I think we have to do in a very short amount of time.
Well, there are some larger scale developments, we'll say, that have been approved in the past, and they have a chunk of wetlands or something on it that if you check in the assessment office, they're already getting a reduction because it's really non-buildable, non-usable type of property. So, a big developer that has an existing thing, if the town were to ask to purchase it, maybe that tax incentive is a tax break on something they already own, so it's a trade-off that's potentially available,
We have two hands up online.
Are you, somebody has their hand up?
Couple people.
Okay, let's let somebody else talk.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Oh, sorry. Sandy, did you want to go first?
Sure. I was just wondering if there couldn't be something written into, and I don't know how this works exactly, but into TPZ bylaws or however that would work, so that if there is something that's related in any way, shape, or form to open space, that they would need to come before us, or or that there would have to be a conversation, or if there was just something that could be incorporated into their process so we don't miss any opportunities.
Yep, so I can kind of answer to that. The zoning regulations are very strictly limited on how they can be constructed, and on third-party referrals. There are certain things that allow you to do it with design districts, with village districts, but they're enabled by statute. So I think the key is kind of as us getting into it. If there's an important piece of property for the town, having that discussion before it comes to that, because as a property owner who has owned a piece of property, the zoning regulations are in place. They have the inherent rights to that property that are represented in the zoning regulations for development, as long as they follow with them. Now, a lot of the thing is it's the carrot approach. And we do have open space subdivisions. We do potentially have that. So you have that combination of looking at development and looking at, okay, you have a large site. How can you create a denser pocket on that site to preserve the rest? And it comes down to that discussion of, are you creating something where the juice is worth the squeeze for the developer, that it makes sense for them to create more density in one area, less utilities, less stretch out, not having to disturb, not as much construction cost for the site. They have a denser area on that one site, but more of the site is preserved in perpetuity. That, I think, is the option when it comes to zoning regulations. And we have things like it in the zoning regulations now. But that's typically what you're provided with when it comes to zoning and the ability to preserve.
You're talking about those, open space subdivision,
Yeah.
whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean that 10% green space or whatever is open to the public. So to me, that's worthless. What's the point of?
Well, no, by the open space subdivision, they're supposed to, by the rule, I believe, deed.
Oh, they deed it to the town?
To the town.
Oh, okay.
Like the Rock Hall subdivision on Church Street. That's an open space subdivision, and they will be deeding the 5 or 6 acres to the town.
And there actually may be cases where I've had applications in my past that I've worked through commissions where like a wetlands commission, for example, there was one that was in the back of a site. And it was an area where you wouldn't want the public going. But it was to preserve a buffer for a natural ecological feature. So it's a lot of like, what is the purpose of that open space? What is it protecting? What is it providing? Some areas absolutely for the public. Some areas may not be a scenario where you want the public going in a certain resource. Maybe it's dangerous terrain. Maybe there's something of the issue, and that's got case by case basis.
Wasn't
Go
there
ahead,
something
Nick.
in place with the Environmental Quality Commission where, like, when the apartments were going up on Cedar, when they were when those were originally proposed, wasn't there something that had to go through environmental quality before it went to TPZ or something like that? Just what I'm wondering is if we could propose to rewrite just the way that things unfold to somehow route them through us if it's related to open space in any way, or no? It seemed like there was something about like environmental quality, and I figured if something
it
would be
had to
related
go
to
before-
environmental quality, then it could come through us.
It went before the Wetlands Commission.
Oh, wetlands, okay.
Environmental quality is not a land use board,
Yeah,
so
okay, so it would work then, yeah, so it's gotta work the same way, okay. Yeah, so there's no way around it sounds like.
Mitch, were you?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of echo Gail's comments, and I appreciate them. And regarding the priorities in our town, and it seems as echoed in the surveys that have been done that we're hearing from residents, that we have, it seems, at least an informal mandate to do this work and to do everything we can in our power to make it happen. So while I appreciate and agree that, and I acknowledge that we all have on the council a super important responsibility to continue to stabilize our mill rate and do what we can to drive growth for businesses. That's a good thing. We have to balance it with this critically important mandate for our quality of life issues, and those quality of life issues we're all well aware of. So I just appreciate that, and yeah, that's it. Thanks.
And when you, Gail, earlier you were speaking about taxes and the tax benefits. Were you thinking about kind of preempting the concept that if we allow development, we get more tax benefit as a town? Because I think that's easily taken down, that argument.
Yeah, that's what, because everybody says, well, you got development, it's gonna lower your taxes, whatever, but there's
Services.
Yeah, people seem to feel that open space has no impact on the it actually is a drain on the financial impact because you're not getting taxes. But I think there's those other characters like the aesthetics, the quality of life, health issues, whatever. But they don't seem to be able to be monetarily, as easily monetarily shown the value versus developing, 250 apartments. And if there was a way we can kind of more easily show people that it's not only just a tree huggers,
Yep.
There's a financial impact positive to the town as well.
Do towns who are, have this, the benefit of having really a healthy amount of open space, do they market that in some way in their, like, our schools are ranked such and such, we have the greatest hospital or whatever, and we have X amount of open space? I just think it'd be interesting if we ever came across information like that to save it and share it, because I think it's exactly what to Gail's point is, how does open space pay for itself as an asset? And that would be, I'm sure we all believe that, but kind of put it in a market it as a concept.
Yeah, like Weathersfield, for example, markets their agricultural heritage.
Yeah.
That's a big part of, you'll see it in their documents over and over again, and that's something that's important. And, when I was in Meriden previously, we marketed it as basically some of the best urban hiking in Connecticut, because it did have all those things. So it's like looking at your assets of what you have. And yes, it does. There are people that I have seen who have said, okay, you have this. And when I have the discussion, they're like, yeah, I absolutely love it. This is why I'm here or
Right.
why I moved close to that area of the town. And that's, what open space could provide too, along with the greenways, along with this opportunity to connect it all together so people can enjoy it. I personally would absolutely love to live on a trail system. I don't currently, but that is a future criteria for myself. When I'm looking at properties is, am I able to get on something where I can get on a bike, jog, whatever, not have to be on the road, be in a natural environment, but still get back to my house without having to get in the car. So there is that value to open space to our residents.
Excellent.
There's, nobody has their hand up?
No, please
Okay,
go.
I don't know whether you all saw about a week or two ago, I guess the city of Hartford got significant amount of money to plant trees. Again, because they recognize that with the tree cutting and development, whatever, it's impacting the health of the residents. And that, so, the whole ecology and open space and whatever is important for people's, and the grant, I think it was a state grant or a federal grant or whatever, is recognizing it. And it was a significant amount of money. So.
They have a lot of parking lots.
Yeah. So do we.
Yep. Any other thoughts about this?
So the only thing I have, and I don't know if the committee wants to go through it, if you want to advance to the next one. So this is, again, a lot of words, but from the Open Space Watershed Land Acquisition Grant. So these are the items that I highlighted at the beginning of this document, saying they should kind of use these as a guide as well. You can see they're very similar. That actually protect land identified. That one is the same that appears in ours, because that's why it goes from grant application to what we looked at. So again, especially valuable recreation, forestry, fishing, and conservation of wildlife and natural resources. Land that contributes to prime natural feature of the state's landscape, including unlimited shoreline, river, tributaries. It goes on and has a little longer, but a significant littoral or estuarine or aquatic site. Protect habitat of native plant and animal species. That's the NDDB. Protect a relatively undisturbed outstanding example. That's in ours as well. Enhance and conserve water quality. Preserve local agricultural heritage. Or this is kind of the water company one, doesn't apply to us. But as you can see, these are from that grant program. So I would say that there isn't anything on here for that grant program that isn't included in this draft.
Great.
So the next item, really small, hard to read. Again, I'm just going to paraphrase. So this is from the Greenway program. Corridor connects existing open space trail segments, historical cultural assets, and alternative transportation, but connecting neighborhoods to schools. Again, we have that connection aspect. When the Greenway, we had that in there as well. This just talks about it's a municipal project. It must be included in the local plan of conservation and development. I do have the POCD document, those couple pages here, if the committee wants to look at it. If not, I recommend taking a look. We have a larger swath through it that identifies as a Greenway, but that's potentially a document that could be refined a little more. If the Greenway is a regional project, again, the COG, and then if the non-governmental project doesn't really apply to what we would be working on. But if we had an NGO who wanted to work with us, we would be absolutely ecstatic to work with them. And then key link in an emerging Greenway, either for conservation or recreation. And then the Greenway reflected in the state's plan once adopted. And then the council should designate the use change of it. So this is the Greenway. So again, if we were to look at using the Greenway program and grants associated with that, I think most of what we have here, again, does work with these criteria. They have the oddball ones of if it's this applying, if it's that, that's just a grant criteria, not a selection criteria. But again, we do have that kind of connection.
So just as a kind of a thought experiment, would Cedar Mountain, any of the parcels that are there that could potentially be acquired. Would any of that, would that fit in as a greenway? I'm trying to envision how, like linking spaces, it's a,
Yeah, I would have to look at that. They would do it. It's kind of isolated in its
Mhm.
connections. The main greenway that we have is that area that kind of goes through Day Street and then up by the Newington Junction area, and that goes into West Hartford. So that's our identified. We actually have that's our one identified greenway
Yeah.
that's on the state's plan.
Yeah.
POCD looks at how can we enlarge that
Okay.
along the brook.
okay,
So I think that's our opportunity for potentially what we can connect. It does go through some industrial areas. There are some challenges, but that's what, a good project could work towards.
How the heck did that get identified as a greenway?
It was actually nominated and it's put on I think when I look back in the history of the minutes, I think it was in there as well.
And that may have been a result as part of state funding and stuff when they were dredging and doing stuff up there in Piper Brook along an area that may have been an impetus for it, or, a carrot,
Okay.
partake of, and we'll get this some kind of designation.
There's always great opportunity too that when we work on potential future flood projects and everything,
Mhm.
there's always an opportunity when you work on a flood project to work in a trail system. To me, that's the ideal time because you're doing enlargement of capacities, you're working on getting rid of invasives, you're already in doing the work for flood control. So adding a trail next to it isn't a higher cost associated with it. It's a lower cost add-on to a large project.
What about that stuff that MDC evasive project that they're doing now? I mean,
I did listen to the council meeting on that too, and I know that the MDC was asked about recreation opportunities for that. It is a private easement. They said they were open to it, but it would be something interesting to see for the future of what connections could be made. It would all come down to a conversation of what happens on them, what MDC's concerns are. There's always the liability question of once you are on someone's land, it's going through an easement that they have a right to, but they might not own the underlying land. So now you're dealing with the easement and the underlying landowner, but there may be opportunities. Just because something is difficult doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
Yeah, and their infrastructure is in that easement typically, so.
Yeah. So they wouldn't want to see anything permanent there that if they had to dig, now they're on the hook for replacement. Yeah, it will become a complicated conversation, but it is an opportunity.
no, it makes sense. Okay, thank you.
So that's the greenways. And then I think the next one, again, this is, I won't reading in the whole part of that open space values at the top. It goes through kind of all the values of open space. But this is from the Recreation and Natural Heritage Program, and it was amended by the Public Act. But again, the values embodied in the state's declared environmental policy include fulfill the responsibilities of each generation or trustee of the environment for succeeding generations, assure safe, healthful, productive, and aesthetically and culturally pleasing surroundings, attain the widest range of beneficial uses of the environment, preserve important historic, cultural, and natural aspect of our Connecticut heritage, and achieve an ecological balance between the population and resource use. Again, I think our criteria do touch on these. These are larger overarching goals and aren't specific criteria, but I kind of wanted to put these out there because these are the state plans. These are things that are referenced in when we go for grants, and these are the things that the state is looking at when we're looking to obtain grant funding.
excellent.
Any more?
I think that might be, yep, that's it.
Okay. Does anybody on the committee have any further comments or any more discussion related to the draft? No.
Go ahead, Sandra.
I was just wondering, because we had the grant writer come in earlier and talk to us about criteria and things like that. And I know criteria sometimes evolves over time. I don't know if this is something that we could just run by her to see what her thoughts are, to see if we should emphasize something or take out something, or if there's something new in the last couple of months that we should be considering.
I would say absolutely. That was my, that was in my, after the discussion we were having here, once I narrowed it down, that's my plan as well too. And thank you.
Great.
Yeah, because she can provide additional insight or just say, hey, you know, this one key phrase, again, the grant, when we're going for the grant, they're not necessarily going to be grading us on this document. However, this document is a great document to support as well. Again, it complies with this and it achieves the town's goals. That is always something they want to see in grant applications, that, again, it's not just one department asking for something, it has the support of the community, which is important to the state when a grant is given.
And as well, different grants have different criteria and they're weighted a little differently. So I think Paul's intent was to try and cover as much of these different items in the grants.
Yeah, no, it's very in-depth. It's,
Yeah, it's also to put it out there to say, this is what the town is looking for. This is what's important. Not even for the residents to see, for property owners to see, for those who may be like-minded, for those who haven't even thought about it. You know, if there's a property owner out there who says, you know what, I don't want to see, I have a large piece of land, I don't want to see this developed. If you're out there and you're listening, please come talk to us. But other than that.
right.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Would it make sense, or would it be valuable to get town council buy-in on an official level before this is finalized, so that you have that input and information included in some form as well?
Mitch and I can just bring it to the table and say, this is what we're working on, but I really don't think, particularly since, quite frankly, at this point, there's no dollar attached to it. I can't see why anybody on the current town council, and actually even the people who are running now, would be against this. There's no dollars attached to it.
But sometimes it's almost better in a way, because it's more of like a goodwill thing, and you're also gaining agreement that it's important. It just kind of, it provides a deeper echo of what the POCD said, and the people that came out to the high school said, that open space is critically important to town, and we can't you know, fall asleep at the wheel and not take advantage of opportunities when they arise. So it'd be just more of an agreement kind of thing versus like a nuts and bolts thing. So I'm not saying give this to them, but if we could just sort of, as a open space committee, come up with something where we could present it to town council to get buy-in, so that it could then be used as a springboard for this document, like to push this further along. That's just my thought.
I personally think Mitch and I can convey it. What do you think, Mitch?
Well, my first thought is, we've got 3 or 4 weeks until the election. Why don't we finish our election, and then whoever's sitting at the table afterwards, I think, just to bring it, just to update the council on what we're doing and get people's responses. I agree, Gail, that I think that the sentiment, I've heard no one speak negatively or against open space, and I think the council is all in favor of it. And because we aren't talking about having to budget any dollars right now, maybe it's a safe way to talk about it after the election.
Yeah, I agree.
Informally give our show of support, you know, and then, go from there.
I don't know if informal would do it, though, because then we couldn't use it in a document like this. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't take it one step further and just have them agree with us in concept on certain points, and then bring it back to the table and use it for something like this. That's
I don't know enough maybe about the rules regarding this document and its application. You may be totally right, Sandy. I was underappreciating the officialness, if that's the word, of the council having to approve the document for its application. Obviously, it impacts town business, so maybe that's the case. And to that extent, then when it feels appropriate and ready, then I would encourage the council to take it under its, purview and discuss it for a more official action, if that's required.
Right, as Mitch said, I mean, at this point, we can say that it's being worked on, and then once we have something more than a rough draft, but at this point, I don't see the purpose of getting an official vote or sign off I think it's just
Because
a
I'm
little
saying,
premature at
yeah,
this
what I'm
point.
saying is to separate the two, to have this be its own, document. It's more on the high level of being in agreement with open space, like just like in the introductory paragraphs of like talking about that it's important to us as a town, and just, go through the general, just to kind of, I think it would just support this document. And again, not wanting it to be, pages and pages long, but if, it says something about, open space was endorsed, as a top, continued top priority by the town council or something, if we could just kind of wedge it in there to be more official than, and, then you guys sitting around the table and saying, yeah, open space is still, important to us, next topic. It just
Well-
seems like if it had the official stamp of something that's important, that could be incorporated into this document, which could then maybe be used, grant wise, that it's still important to the town, that it continues to be. I don't know, just something I'm
Well,
thinking
yeah,
about.
I mean, I'm
would
not
s-
gonna
I
argue
would
with
s- yeah.
about this, but the fact is that we're incorporating the fact that 2 community surveys have been done. We're incorporating the fact that it's part of the official POCD. I think the statement is basically there. So as Mitch said, I think let's just wait till after the election and see who's sitting at the table. But I really, I'm not
Yeah, I mean, it may very well be
quite
true,
sure
Gil.
what
What you're
you're
saying
looking
maybe,
for.
yeah, what you're saying is maybe the point's driven home enough that we don't have to go any
And-
further.
And I would just
Which may
say,
be true.
have the chair bring it through, maybe communicate through email or make a presentation to the new council and mayor, whoever that is. And then, when the time is right after the election, I think for us to revisit this as a council and just discuss it may be very appropriate, but let's get our house in order here before we present that to them. Yeah.
Right.
That was my thought too, is that at the end of the day, we want to have some words that we want to stand behind.
Mhm.
And they would be, these would be our guidelines. Will be the thing that drives our actions and drives our potential, this is what's going to drive potential acquisitions, is this criteria. And we need to have criteria because of grants require them and all of that. So we know all of that. I'd say we continue to work on this and we make whatever changes we need to make, and we take a look at it again. And then I say, I like Mitch's idea, and I think I don't think it's a bad idea to bring it to town council, but what I mean, Paul, you can tell me what you think the best approach is, but I would think that we would say to them, this is what we've been doing.
Mhm.
This is what we've been doing to make an architecture for selection of open space, because we know how important it is to the town. We know how important it is to the residents. We know how important it is to you. And they maybe have the option of also adopting it. So then we would make that request, correct?
Yeah.
And what would it, I mean, this would then become the town of Newington, just like the town of Simsbury, right? It wouldn't say, oh, it's just open space committee's
Yep.
working document.
It
It would be the town of Newington's criteria.
Change was just a few words. Instead of
Change the
saying
header.
not even
Oh.
in the areas where it says the open space committee, it'll say the town of Newington. So that would be the only change required if the council did want to adopt it as a
Right.
document. And, basically that looking of the ability of the open space committee to recommend things to the council. And then everything's on there, from there, it's the council's decisions.
Yes.
But I do like the idea of polishing it some before. This is great. As I said, we're working through the document. And I think even for those who take a look at it afterwards and see the document, if anyone wants to know how we got there, it'll all be part of the record, and I will sit down and discuss it with any counselor who wants to say, why does this document say this?
Right. Is it being adopted to the extent that it becomes the criteria of the town of Newington? Does that make it a more important document for official requests or official grant? I mean, is that way more? I mean, the plan of conservation and development is very important.
I would say if it wasn't a grant criteria, the POCD would weigh higher than this document.
Okay,
But this document can also, again, as we look at the POCD next update or any revisions that come in between,
Yep.
we can look at this document as well in looking at that. Like, for example, the POCD had a recommendation to look at the definition of open space. In a way, that was actually a criteria. If in the POCD, there's this 4-part area where it says on the side that actually recommends that the Open Space Committee look at the definition. By doing this document, you're actually kind of really defining it even more so than that way. So you're accomplishing a POCD goal in another way in a more useful document.
Yep. No, that's great. And that would help us prepare for when we want to present this to, that's something else we can bring up. Okay. Any more comments from anyone here tonight? Thoughts? Okay, so we can move on to the next agenda item.
Yep,
So
that's actually that's the agenda item for tonight.
That's the agenda item. And then public comments is next on the agenda.
No one in the room.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll get some people in the room next time. Any further comments from committee members?
I just again, I'm sorry, Sandy, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
You're talking first, Mitch. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Mr. Dixon again for all your work on this. I appreciate you very much. And anyone else who had a hand in this, it made it, it's seeming to make it much sort of more digestible and so forth and understandable. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, well, if there's no other comments, would anyone like to make? Sandra, please.
And I'm sorry, because I don't have the agenda still in front of me. Are we going to be talking about next month, some of our appointments expire?
That would be up to, whatever after the elections.
Right.
Okay,
So
'cause
I will definitely take a look into that on the timing, talk to everyone I need to make sure. I'll have to check.
I think there's 3 of us
Yeah.
who expire
I'll
in
have to
March,
check
November rather.
Newington. Yeah, I'll have to check Newington specific ones. Typically in the past of every time I've seen a committee, when you have an appointment and it hasn't been replaced, there typically is some type of clause in there that says it does continue until. Most people have that catch all within it, just to make sure you don't all of a sudden have a committee or a commission that, oh, it expired, you can't vote, you don't have a quorum or anything like that. So I will definitely double check on that timing and talk to who I need to see that moves forward.
And the calendar too is something that,
I think we adopted that last time. Yeah.
all right, good. Any other thoughts? Gail, you're good? Okay. Anyone at home, any other thoughts or questions about steps or anything else?
No.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
I second.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Night,
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Oh, thanks.